Don't compare yourself with other people, compare yourself with who you were yesterday. It's in responsibility that most people find the meaning that sustains them through life. It's not in happiness. It's not in impulsive pleasure. The idea that women were oppressed throughout history is an appalling theory. The truth is something that burns. It burns off dead wood. And people don't like having the dead wood burned off, often because they're 95% dead wood. Women deeply want men who are competent and powerful. And I don't mean power in that they can exert tyrannical control over others. That's not power. That's just corruption. No one gets away with anything, ever, so take responsibility for your own life. Accept the terrible responsibility of life with eyes wide open. If you don't stand your ground, then all that happens is people push you backwards. Power is competence. It's very hard to find your own words, and you don't actually exist until you have your own words. When you start to realize how much of what you've constructed of yourself is based on deception and lies, that is a horrifying realization. One of the things I've told men over and over and over and over is if you're being rejected by all the women that you approach, it's not the women. We're so immaturely cynical as a culture. We're not wise enough to look at an institution like marriage and to really think about what it means and what it signifies. It signifies a place where people can tie the ropes of their lives together so that they're stronger. It signifies a place where people can tell the truth to one another. Become aware of your own insufficiency. The people who hold that our culture is an oppressive patriarchy, they don't want to admit that the current hierarchy might be predicated on competence. Part of the core information that I've been purveying is that identity politics is a sick game. You don't play racial, ethnic, and gender identity games. The left plays them on behalf of the oppressed, let's say, and the right tends to play them on behalf of nationalism and ethnic pride. I think they're equally dangerous. Music has an intrinsic meaning, which has always been mysterious to me. The masculine spirit is under assault. It's obvious. If you're not going to be rewarded for your virtues, and instead you're going to be punished for them, then what's your motivation to continue? Once someone has spent enough time cultivating bad habits and biding their time, they are much diminished. Much of what they could have been has dissipated. I've studied authoritarianism for a very long time, for 40 years, and they're started by people's attempts to control the ideological and linguistic territory. I have a hard time figuring out what kind of box to put me in, too, because I don't know exactly what's going on around me or why. But I need to stay outside of boxes because then I can look at what's inside of them without being part of them. You can't go backward in life. I happen to be a big fan of Western civilization. I think it beats the hell out of tyranny and starvation. There were some great clinicians in the 20th century, great men. Freud was a genius, Jung was a genius, Carl Rogers was a genius. There's a half-dozen psychologists of the 1950s and humanists of the 1960s. I'm a practical person. I'm not too bad a carpenter. I can renovate houses. We have to rediscover the eternal values and then live them out. I could hardly sit through Frozen. There was an attempt to craft a moral message and to build the story around that, instead of building the story and letting the moral message emerge. It was the subjugation of art to propaganda, in my estimation. The highly functional infrastructure that surrounds us, particularly in the West, is a gift from our ancestors. The comparatively uncorrupt political and economic systems, the technology, the wealth, the lifespan, the freedom, the luxury, and the opportunity. Abortion is clearly wrong. I don't tell people, you are okay the way that you are. That's not the right story. The right story is, you are way less than you could be. It is more difficult to rule yourself than to rule a city. Adopt responsibility for your own well-being. Try to put your family together, try to serve your community, try to seek for eternal truth. That's the sort of thing that can ground you in your life, enough so that you can withstand the difficulty of life. Happiness is a pointless goal. There's a personality trait known as agreeableness. Agreeable people are compassionate and polite, and agreeable people get paid less than disagreeable people for the same job. Women are more agreeable than men. Don't lie about anything, ever. Lying leads to hell. If you're talking to a man who wouldn't fight with you under any circumstances whatsoever, then you're talking to someone for whom you have absolutely no respect. Life is tragic. You are tiny and flawed and ignorant and weak, and everything else is huge, complex, and overwhelming. Don't be dependent. At all. Ever. Period. Free speech is not just another value. It's the foundation of Western civilization. It makes sense that a witch lives in a swamp. As pessimistic as I am about the nature of human beings and our capacity for atrocity and malevolence and betrayal and laziness and inertia, and all those things, I think we can transcend all that and set things straight. Men and women aren't the same. And they won't be the same. That doesn't mean that they can't be treated fairly. You should do what other people do, unless you have a very good reason not to. Life is very difficult. One of the most ancient of religious ideas that emerges everywhere, I would say, is that life is essentially suffering. You may say, well, dragons don't exist. It's like, yes they do. The category predator and the category dragon are the same category. It absolutely exists. It's a superordinate category. It exists absolutely more than anything else. In fact, it really exists. You can't have a value structure without a hierarchy. They're the same thing because a value structure means one thing takes precedence over another. To master a new technology, you have to play with it. I have something in common with Nazis in that I am opposed to the radical left. And when you oppose the radical left, you end up being a part of a much larger group that includes Nazis in it. The most propagandistic element of Frozen was the transformation of the prince at the beginning of the story, who was a perfectly good guy, into a villain with no character development whatsoever about 3/4 of the way to the ending. It's very difficult to regulate yourself, and if you learn to do that, well, it starts to spill over. You can say, well, isn't it unfortunate that chaos is represented by the feminine? Well, it might be unfortunate, but it doesn't matter, because that is how it's represented. It's been represented like that forever. And there are reasons for it. You can't change it. It's not possible. This is underneath everything.